Greetings. We're going to continue with our SithasoDaisy5 Low Code Generator. By the end of this particular reel, you will have created this particular address book. We are continuing with our last tutorial where we were using preference dialog, and we showed how to create a menu with we changed the background color of our navigation bar. We added search. Also put in a tag text. This example, however, will show you how to use a second drawer. This is the drawer. Second drawer will show on this particular side of the screen. Like, for example, when you click on add here, it will pop up from there, right? And then we can capture a province name, for example, and then click apply, and then it saves. Then there is a province X. Then you can also delete it if you want, And then categories, you can also edit category, and it will push up the drawer on the right, and then edit an existing record, and you save it, and you refresh. And then on contacts, these currently use preference dialog, but which is hosted inside a drawer. That's why you see the label here and the name here. Categories, they use a preference dialog hosted inside a drawer. However, for the contacts, we decided to use a CRUD element that is hosted inside a drawer. For example, if you click on edit here, the drawer will appear, but we have designed it in such a way that it has a grid internally where you can put elements anywhere you want. For example, this is row 1, just like when we were creating the motels in our previous examples. So this is full name, this is mobile, this is telephone. You see the labels of these are on top compared to the provinces where they are on the side. So these ones are on the side because we're using a preference dialog inside the drawer. However, for contacts, we're using a modal form, a modal card form, which is inside the drawer itself. So we have your email, your categories. Also here you can add a category, just like we were doing in the previous example. And here you can add a province. So basically this means that inside your drawer you can have any component that you want and place it in whatever way that you want. Because the drawer that is here, it has a side content, and that's how it is behaving the way that it's behaving. So let's add a new contact here, and then you click save. The contact has been saved. And if you remember, our contacts, we can see them by the beginning of the full name, D, M, N, O, P, and all sorts of other things. And also you can do a search, for example, DU is Dinsha port, and then when you click on it, then it will activate your default email sending program. So you can create any, the goal here is for you to create any CRUD functionality that you can. For example, where you want to store information, that could be from an Excel spreadsheet and all sorts of other things, but you will be able to store that information and be able to also report on it. So for now, we're just covering the part where you add, edit, and update and delete information from the database using a table, using a form with grids, using preferences, which is like this, and we have discussed these issues before. Remember in our previous example, when we are clicking add, our form didn't appear, it just showed as part of this table, and the form will show side to side next to each other. So in this particular case, what we're doing is to show a right drawer, so that with an overlay, so that it shows on top of the current existing information. So as you can see, while the other approach works for particular cases, this will also work for particular cases depending on your needs, you know. And then contacts, then we add, then we see the information that is here. We can also use a preference dialog for the contact form, which have a grid but have items on top of each other. So if you go back to our low code tool, remember we initially created a contract here, and then we specified that this was going to use WebSQL, which is the index DB that is stored on the internet, and then Control-Shift-I and go to applications. You actually see where the information is stored. This information is stored in the browser. Now the risk with this is that at times when the browser is running out of memory, then it deletes the information that is here, which is why if you have an offline approach kind of like this, what you need to do is to synchronize your information with the main database. This is useful where, for example, people do not have a network where they are, and then they can use the browser database to store the information. But as soon as they reach a place with the internet servers, so this is currently our tool database. This is the address book database that is stored in our browser. This is one is for this tool. So these are the fields, these are the projects, which is this one, and these are the tables that we have, you know, because we're using the tool on the browser. So we initially created a project, then within the project we specify the table that we needed to do. Now if you look in terms of the sequence flow here, what we're doing here is to follow a database first approach, where for example we're designing the database and then designing the user interface. Of course you can follow whatever approach that you want. You can start with the user interface, then to the database. I find this particular approach easy for me, because what it happens is you can structure, chop and change your database as you design it, planning, so that at the end of the day the user interface looks the way that you want. And also with the other approach where you start with your design, you can start with your design. If for example you have complex design, you can start with them and then you can go back and design the database. The ease of this one is that when you're creating your tables, we know that this table will be linked to a particular page, database, like for example this particular page, and then we know that it will have this, and then we already know the component type to use in relation to the various ones that are there. As you can see here, there are a couple of components that we can use: avatars, buttons, camcorder, camera, checkbox, and all sorts of other things. So depending on in terms of what your application will be doing, you will be able to store information in different elements and also things. Currently we have used the select or select group because we wanted to select provinces and so how that works. But for more complicated or advanced application features, you might need to add other features, like for example you want a file input where a file will be required from the user. We'll look into that when we're dealing with how to actually save. Like for example, images you can store in a database as base64 strings, or you can store them as the actual format and things. So this approach works easy because at the end of the day, you start with your database, then you go to your user interface, because the methodology of this particular tool is basically the same. The end goal is that you have a table like this, and then you have a screen like this, content for your database. Basically meaning that if you want to store simple information in a database but without having to use, so what we did here in relation to this particular way of doing this and using a site navigation, the right drawer, was to add a new functionality into the application itself. Remember, this tool is being developed as we go along, so as much as ideas are creeping in, so for example, the categories and provinces, our address book, this one is using a preference dialog inside this. So that is why here it is preferences. And then this one is using use modal card. You remember in the previous demo, we explained how the mobile card use works. So it's a mobile card. So it's a model card because it's a model that is categorized as a card which we can place anywhere. But usually a model in itself, it just appears on the screen, just like this one. You see, this is a model. It's not a model card. So like when you add, it shows like this. So this was usually the first demo example where we're using models. And then we use preference dialog, and then we use the model card that actually appears more like this, but not, it can be hosted also anywhere. So what we're doing now here is to say on our context, for example, if we preview the screen here, as you can see, the design of this particular screen is exactly the same. So look at this one. Same thing, same design. But instead of it sitting like this in a model that shows by itself, the model card is sitting inside this particular drawer here. That's why you're able to see it here. So that's what we did here, by just changing this particular setting. Oh, I'm supposed to be here. By just changing this particular setting here to say we are using a sidebar, which will be the right sidebar, and then we are using the model card for this particular example. And then the code, for example, for this, if we go to fields and then we generate the code, as you can see here, is a little bit different. For example, add a new code model and give it a name PG contacts. We know that we've been doing it for a while. And then it says then open the MDL side view layout and rename it to contact side view. So the side view that we're talking about is this particular component here. It's empty when you load it, and then we need to put content inside it, and then we put the model card inside of it. And then in the contact side view layout, rename MDL to MDL contacts. We've done a model before, so this is the same approach that we did before. So I'm not going to re-explain it again because it's the same thing. It's just that it gives you a clear instruction in terms of do this, do that, just like in our first example. So you go and follow these particular instructions to do this. Then you copy this code to the PG contacts index, just like we did before. And basically there's nothing that has changed except a few things that I'm going to show you. Now, the way that this right side drawer is sitting, it's sitting in the base layout. This is the code of the address book. Now if you go to the base layout, of this thing, of our demo application, our right drawer actually here. Our right drawer is here. There we added it. the left drawer, this is the main component that is here, is, you know, so this can have content inside it. It has a side contact, and it has actions. So we are placing this right drawer inside the up drawer content portion. Just like we have placed this nav bar inside the app drawer content, and this page view inside the app drawer content, and this one here we've placed it under the side content. Yeah. So this right drawer is actually a side content, yeah, but it also has its own content inside it. But we put everything inside of the side content because this is exactly the same component. You see, S5 drawer, this one is also S5 drawer. But what we do here, because it's going to be appearing on the right, we give it a property of right side to tell it that it's going to be appearing on the right side. It must have an overlay as usual, like the other one. Yeah? Like for example, this one here. This one is saying on a medium and up devices stay open. This one, we're not doing that in it. That's why this is blank. There's an overlay. This one also has an overlay. We want the height, the minimum height of this drawer to be the screen, and the width to be 600 pixels, which basically means that when it's opened, just like this here, this is actually 600 pixels here to here. Now we'll also see the edges here. This is the radius, top left radius, bottom left radius. We have made it to be XL. For example, this one here, this one does not have a radius in this, so basically we can control how this appears. So this makes your application a little bit slick, you know. So what we also did here was to say, fine, this is on the right side and enabled and all sorts of things. And then we said the rounded top left, which is this side there that you saw, must be XL. You can choose how you want it to be rounded. And then round and bottom left, which is this part, you know, does not have a shadow and all. This is absolute placement and things like that. This placement can be anything like that. So what we did here is to place a drawer component inside. We placed this drawer component inside this drawer component. Yeah? That's what we did. That is how we created two drawers here. But of course, the drawers are activated via button clicks. And then, so that was our changes to our layout. And then what we also did was to add some code here that was indicating that we need to add some other functions. Like for example, open the right drawer, close the right drawer, close the right drawer by force, you know. So open drawer is true to open it, so we can call this method anyway. Close drawer, you see. So these two methods are the methods that are working behind the scenes when you click add here. When you click add here, the open drawer method is executed and it opens this particular drawer. Now when you say no, it executes the close drawer code, which is basically, it calls these two codes here. So that is what is happening. Even here, when you do an edit, the edit contact, it opens the drawer on the right side, and then you can see the information that is here. So let's basically talk about the code. So this is the contacts code. So what is happening here? We built the contacts model, which basically says the model is there, its width is there, it's a card, of course. Remember, this is hosted inside. Basically builds the grid. The grid is all of these rows and columns where the information is sitting. And then we add in each particular location the component that we need to add. Like for example here, as the ID is not visible, we add the full name, which is what you see at 2 is 1. Basically this is row 2 is 1, and then we add mobile at 3 1 and 3 2. So at 3 1 and 3 2, etc., etc. You see what I mean? Then that's what we do. And then here, the contacts view, there are two views that we have. The first one, it has the table, which is basically this one here, the table, where you see all of your contacts listed as in here. As here, this is a table where your contacts are listed. And then the second view is the contact side view, which is basically the model, which is a card that sits inside the drawer, the right drawer. So the code to actually do that is on show. For example, when you show the page, contacts view is loaded, which is the one that has the table. And then inside the right drawer side content, load the card, which is the side nav card. And then build the contacts table, which basically builds the user interface for the contacts by adding all the columns. And then you build the model, like build the structure of this model with the components that are here. And then after that, you mount the contacts, so basically showing that you load any contacts that are in the database. So that's basically what we do each and every time the show command is executed. The show command, as we saw, is executed when we're clicking contacts. Provinces, show for provinces is called, show for categories is called, and show for contacts is called. So that is how this thing works. And then there's a fake contact method here, where, for example, it demonstrates that when we click here, generate a fake contact that we can add to the database with fake data. Okay. And then what we do next, build the contacts table. Yeah? It basically says that the tooltip edit contact that you see here, yeah? Add contact and all sorts of other things, and all that. And then there's columns here. There's full name column, mobile telephone. As you can see, there's full name, mobile telephone, and the telephone is not visible. As you can see here, set column visible telephone. False. You see. So this code here, it builds the structure of this particular table. So I'm just rehashing now in relation to what we did. And then mount the contacts, which basically go to the database and load all the contacts that are there, you know. And then click add, you load existing categories, you load existing provinces, and then you execute add code. Add mode, if you go to add mode, as you recall, changes the mode to C because we're creating a record, changes the title to add contact, which is what happens when we click here, add contact, as you can see. And then it loads the combo boxes, which is the selects, which is these ones, with whatever categories are existing, you know. And then what we do, set default values, and then it generates a fake contact, and then it opens the right drawer, which is the sequence of what you're seeing here. You click add, then it executes particular events, and then it opens the drawer, you know. And then focus on text to full name. Okay, it's not focusing, but it's something that we can look at in the future in terms of what's going on there. So the functionality, as you can see here, is the same. The only thing that has changed in all of these examples is this right drawer. Remember, in the other one, we had columns that were being visible and not visible, and they're showing the preference dialog. So we have done away with that, and instead of that, we're using the right drawer. So this is calling PG index open right drawer, which we saw that this is open right drawer here, né? And then there's also a close right drawer method here, like your edit mode also. it opens the right drawer, and then clone. When you click clone now, it opens the right drawer, because when you click clone, when you click edit, it opens the right drawer. When you click clone, it opens the right drawer. When you click add, it also opens the right drawer. So those are the things that are actually happening here. We're telling the program what is it that it needs to do. So by telling it what is it that we need to do, we're defining the logic of the application. So as you can see here, there's nothing that is automatically created. It's things that we need to feed our application to actually do something. And as you can see, there are comments that I've written here in terms of what is it that it does now. Delete a contact. You click delete, it gives you a prompt. This code of the prompt is this one. Show confirmation, confirm, delete, yes, no. Yes, no. Then you click add, then it deletes the person. It goes to the database and deletes the person, and then reloads everything that is there. Clone row, load categories, compute the value, load provinces, set defaults, so that when we are doing add and things, everything is blank if there was no fake contact, fake record. This one is validating. This one is when yes is clicked. So when yes is clicked here, and then it says all this code that is here is executed. It validates the record, and then it shows the spinner. Like, for example, this spinner here that you saw that had 3 colors, this is that code that does that, and then reads the information from the input components, and then opens the database, prepare records, and then if it's saving, depending on the mode, then you create or then you update, as indicated previously. When you click edit, the mode changes to you, then it fires update. But then when you click add, it see, then it adds. That's why different things are happening, So that is why you see what you see here. So when you see it's creating, there is updating, and then it gives you the information, and then it closes the right drawer, then it loads the contacts again that are existing. Here we click no. Let's say add, and then you decide you don't want to continue, you click no, which is basically this particular entry here, and then build the contact mode. Well, I did explain that. And then what else is here? Category append. Category append is exactly the same like before. Category click append, which is basically asking you to add a new category. Add category, please type a new category to add, and it goes to the database, and then it adds that particular category. Same with the provinces. Provinces, add a province. As you can see from here, there's nothing that is so different about the code that we have generated now. It's just that there are new layouts that we have generated, and then the new method of opening a drawer and closing a drawer. But if you could compare this code with the one that we did with the model, most of it is almost 99% the same code. Just with little tricks, then you'll be able to have an application that is behaving differently and working differently. Now, in the upcoming examples, we'll be dealing with the bottom drawer, where, for example, you have your form. Instead of it appearing from on the right side, then what it will do, it will appear from the bottom here. These are also other options of giving you in terms of how you can design your applications. Remember, our starting example, we started with an actual model, which basically was like this, which basically worked like this. This is the most used approach in most cases. In most cases, you will have an application that works like this, where you have your model showing as it is, and then it brings you an overlay. And then we shifted to a preference dialog approach, you know. Preference dialog approach is using this particular component, but this particular one is inside the drawer. So we have this preference dialog that we can also build, apply cancel, and then the third approach basically then is using the side drawer to actually have a form inside of it with grids and placement of the components at various locations where we want, you know. So this particular design might not necessarily be very available for your more mobile application, you know, because it's but you can maybe let's do this. Let's see how this thing will work if we change the design. See, so on a mobile it's not responsive, you see. So those are the things that we need to look at when we're designing our applications. Make sure that these are mobile responsive and things. So you might use this approach when you're actually fixing your design to desktop, you know, because the application might not necessarily be used for a mobile application. That's why it's easy when you're doing mobile application just to use a preference dialog like this, you know, not inside a drawer but just by itself, because it can be responsive. But we'll look in relation to how other designs will feature in relation to our next particular examples. But yeah, so this covers it. As I'm indicating, it's the same approach that we've been building like before, the same approach that we are following in relation to creating the other examples of the address books. But it's other things a little bit different because we're using new components and new design. But the code is basically 99% the same across the board for all of these particular examples. The issue is just the components that have been, the preference dialog of course will work differently to the modal dialog, you know, because its name starts with pref, and then the modal one, the name starts with MTL, but the table has been the same TBL. So all the code for the table will be the same, and then the modals will be the same, this will be the same, but they are doing the same thing in essence. So I will also make these examples available from the GitHub and also the tool, you know. So as I'm indicating, we'll look in terms of the bottom drawer. Then we look in terms of adding a delete all functionality here, you know, because sometimes you want to delete all records, which might not be a safe thing to do, but sometimes you just want to delete records from a table. Then you need to add that select all functionality here so that you see how that works. But all in all, our examples are coming together nicely in terms of the demonstration here of what we did. We're dealing with the first drawer on the left and another drawer on the right. This is the modal card, and it covers everything that we have done so far. And the code, of course, is generated by the tool, and you just change the settings here. And then understanding how all of these things works, of course, will be an advantage because you play around with them, you see what they do. You can also push some questions and ask some questions in relation to what you want to do, and you can take it from there. All right, thank you.